I'm Greg, a sailor, bagpiper, and a jack of all trades. I am back. Been a while since I posted. We took a trip down to the Bahamas, which you've seen posted, and that was a couple of weekends. 2 weekends down there, and a week beforehand, and then a couple of weeks afterwards of my procrastinating, and I just was sort of getting burned out of everything that I've been working on and, you know, the craziness of life. So took a little time off and recharged batteries, and now I am back in the shop. I'm feeling a little disappointed with the doors and have decided that I'm not going to try to resurrect the old doors. I have brand new plywood panels. I ordered some new teak. I'm going to remake the doors completely so they'll be brand new and they'll look much better. Only got a couple of hours today. This is a Saturday afternoon, and I just want to crank the sander up and try to get, a couple more grits of sandpaper on all of the toe rails and begin to get that project to the point where I can start putting finish on. So a couple hours today, that's what I'm going to do, see if I can work up through a couple of grits and get from the 80 up to, hopefully up to 180, so we can start putting finish on. So that's my goal for this afternoon. We'll see how much I get done. Well, let's see, it's been a couple of hours, I think, looking up the clock, which the battery's dead and the clock stopped, so I have no idea what time it is. I'm assuming it's a little after 5. A couple of hours to sand everything down. I started, it had been scraped and sanded to 80 grit. I went from 80 to 120, and then I'm going to go from 120 to 150. So a couple of hours to get everything sanded today, and then tomorrow I'll come down here in the morning and probably do everything again to get it from 120 up to 150, and then I'm going to put on the coat of sanding sealer and see how it looks, and then probably after that get it up to 180 and then start applying the finish. One of the things that I need to do right now, they had added some blocks onto the toe rail. Let's see, so this wooden block right here was added on, and then there was another block attached to it, and that was a lead for the spinnaker sheets. So this one, you can see maybe you can, maybe you can't, a couple of bungs right there. They attached this with screws and bunged it all over. This one here, they didn't attach it with screws and bung it over, they just attached it with screws. So I'm going to pull those screws, epoxy it together, countersink it, screw it on, and then bung it over so that it'll look better. So I'm going to do that right now, and then the epoxy will be curing overnight, and then we can start, sanding again tomorrow up to the 180 grit and start putting finish on. So there are the combing sides, and then all the grab rails and the tiller and the stern toe rail piece. And then these 4 here are all the port toe rail, and these 3 are the starboard toe rails. The port toe rail has 4 pieces because this section was broken and they had to replace it. You can see that the starboard toe rail is really long with that little fitting down there at the end, and this is where the bow light, and there's a port bow light and a starboard bow light on either side of the boat up the bow. So this section goes into the bow pulpit and was a replacement piece that attaches on right here. So anyway, I will try to get this little piece done right now, and we'll, call it a night. So I think what I'm going to do is just use these screws to fasten this in place. When the epoxy is set, then I'll be able to back the screws out, countersink it, put new screws in, and then bung it over. So that's my plan for right now. That way it'll make sure that it's lined up using these screws right in where they had been before. 1 gram and then 5 grams of catalyst. 5 grams of resin, 1 gram of catalyst. Make sure it's all well mixed and even. Only 1 gram of catalyst and 5 grams of resin is still a lot more epoxy than I needed for this little project. Get the screws protruding a little bit so that I can find the screw holes. Back the screws out a little bit so that they'll seat properly. And there we go. And nice squeeze out all the way around. And that's good. And then tomorrow I can back these out, drill them again, counter bore. All right, it is Sunday morning. So yesterday it took me 2 hours, start to finish, to sand all the toe rails, all the cockpit combing, all the grab rails, sand everything from 80 grit up to 120 grit. My goal today is to sand it at 150 grit, and then I think that's going to be sufficient to put the first coat of sanding sealer on, which is 50% varnish, 50% paint thinner, and that'll be the first prep coat. So with any luck, we'll get that done today. It is about 11 o'clock, so a couple hours right after lunch, clean everything up, and then see what we can do to put a coat of finish on. Let's get to it. But first, we had epoxied this piece on yesterday. I got to pull the screws out, drill it out, re-screw it, and bung it. And then we'll be ready to move forward. Okay, do that first. So unfortunately, the audio went out again, but here I'm showing that the epoxy has kicked and is nice and solid. I now have my counter bore and I'm drilling a test hole to make sure that it is the right size for the screw and for the bung. Now I've determined that it's the right length for the screw that I have, and so we can go ahead and drill the holes in the block. First hole's done. Now we'll drill out the second one. Now it's time to put the screws back in. Maybe belts and suspensors, since the epoxy is probably more than enough to secure the block, but makes sense to have some mechanical fastenings in there also. And now we're just checking to make sure that the bungs are the right size. Put a little glue on the bungs. So smear the glue around, make sure all surfaces are covered, and then put the first bung in. Now put a little glue on the second bung. And we'll put that bung in. So one of the things we want to make sure is that the grain in the bung is in the same direction as the grain in the wood. That'll help ensure that the bung disappears. Well, I think the microphone is working, but I'm not positive. So at this point, I've taken the mic off. Now, when I'm getting ready to chisel off the bungs, in addition to having the grain run parallel to the grain in the piece of wood, grain also can sometimes run uphill or it can run downhill. So if the grain is running downhill and I try to cut off here, it may run down and now the surface of the bung will be below the surface of the wood. And I definitely don't want that. So what I normally do is I come up higher and will just chip it off. It looks like the grain's running that way, just a little teeny bit. So that means I can go a little bit lower and slowly work my way down to it. And then when I get closer, this chisel is garbage. Absolutely needs to be resharpened. This one is much sharper. That looks much better. Now, all right, that's perfect. I'm not thrilled with the checking in this, but it's fairly tight, and well, a little bit of varnish inside there will help seal that up and solve that problem. So now that that's done, this piece of wood has not been sanded down to 180 grit yet, so we'll do that right now. And then everything will be down to 180 grit, including the boom crutch, the tiller, and the paddle for my Marshall 15. So, well, everything's been sanded down and ready to start putting finish on. All right, everything feels beautiful. Nice and smooth. 180 grit, definitely got it there. All right, so now I want to vacuum everything down, clean up the shop a little bit, and then wipe everything down with paint thinner, and then we'll mix up some finish and go at it. Woohoo! Well, that was humorous. So I was winding down the video, and so that's it. I think I'm done. And my GoPro went beep, 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 battery dead. So not only was I done, but so was the GoPro. Fortunately, I have other batteries. So anyway, as I was saying, I'm wrapping things up. It's only 1:30. Holy mackerel. I'm going to maybe go down and work on editing videos. So what I've accomplished this weekend was sanding all the wood, toe rails, grab rails, cockpit combing, sanding everything from 80 grit to 120 to 180. And then I put on one coat of basically a sanding sealer, half varnish, half paint thinner. And so everything, and it looks pretty awesome, I must say. There are the cockpit combings, there's the emergency tiller, and here are all the grab rails and the rest of the combing. I even put a coat on the name board. And so that is all done. And I figured this is a good stopping point. Let everything in the shop. I don't want to create any more dust down here now that I've got everything spread out and covered with finish. So anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy it. Please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to get the videos when the new ones come out. Hopefully we'll start making a lot of progress now that things are warming up and I can actually get back out into the boat. Thanks for following Slow Air. See you soon.